What I usually do is just take a picture and edit it from start to finish in a tutorial format, and I kind of know what I want to do and do it rather quick while not having time to really go in depth about everything. But what I want to do today is actually take a picture that I've never even edited or touched before, and I just want to kind of figure out the process of what I want to do with it while recording this video. And I'm just going to show you the whole process, and if I make some adjustment that just doesn't look good, or I want to go back to something, then I will just do that without cutting and just show you really the whole process rather than just like a tutorial. Anyways, let's get started right now. I'm gonna bring up the shadows first of all, because I do want to have a little bit more shadow detail, bring down the highlights. So a lot of times before I actually, edit, really, I just go into the exposure, kind of see, does it work better if it's bright or dark, or sometimes I go into the color temperature and see, do I want to have it warm, do I want to have it bluish? And I'm pretty sure I already know that I want to have it more cold bluish. It works really well for night pictures actually, and I want to mix that with a bit of purple. Another thing that I have to admit, like sometimes I think I get too much used to just bring up the shadows because it looks great in a lot of cases. But here in night pictures, I think I'm actually going to embrace, this darkish mood a bit more and actually bring down the shadows, whereas previously I just brought them up. Now, contrast is another thing that I'm very careful about because it's very easy to just make it look very, just weird, too contrasty, too blotchy. So I prefer to have all of the detail at the start and then just use local adjustments to edit it further. And whites, I love bringing up the whites because it adds, just look at the picture, 0 whites, like 70 whites, it just looks so much more interesting and cool. But the whites can do so much. It's one of my favorite sliders because it's so different than any other slider. And in a lot of pictures you can actually use it when you don't use it too much, then you really make it look better without making it look over the top. So another thing is the blacks. A lot of people will just bring them down, but I personally don't really like that look because again, it makes stuff a lot too blotchy, especially if the picture overall is already dark. So what I'm gonna do is just leave them at 0, add some clarity, and you can see, you can also play with minus clarity. Really don't be afraid of that, but just plus clarity will add so much more, crispness, more details in the whole textures and the whole structures, because for minus, everything is very dreamy, but also by bringing it up, everything is super pronounced and all of these little textures are very prominent, which might not be something you want if you have like a ton of grass or a forest or something like that. I'm gonna bring it up here by overall. Also, I'm gonna bring up the vibrance, bring down saturation. I guess I could explain like everything in super detail and make this an hour long, but I don't think anybody wants to watch that. So I'm just gonna do some adjustments without explaining it super in depth with certain sliders that I think are kind of, that I've talked about for quite some times in different tutorials. I guess that's kind of the fun of editing like this. You really see the whole process even if I mess up. Yeah, let's just bring up the lights. I'm now down here in the tonal curve because I want to just fine adjust the exposure here and just the basics, and the tonal curve is mostly for the entire edit, kind of the look that I want to go for. And if I show you the before and after, you see mainly the exposure is much more kind of how I want the overall picture to be, and also the color is much closer there. But it's definitely, there's still a lot to be done. So now, after all of this, I'm actually just gonna skip all of this stuff right here and go into the vignetting, because I really like to have some dark corners in these night pictures, since overall it's pretty bright and I like it bright and I like all of these signs and all of that stuff. But you really want to be careful, because if you just make everything in the night picture super bright, it can be quite unnatural looking. And just to show you with negative exposure in the vignetting right here, it just adds so much and it really brings back all of this night vibe and night look. Another thing is definitely transform. Let's just try out auto. Yeah, that definitely does a great job. So you can see before the signs were kind of off, and especially if you shoot at an angle, not completely straight, then it's a very easy thing to accidentally do. So auto works a lot of times. Sometimes you do have to go into the custom ones with the guided, so you can actually take lines and, you know, do that all manually, but auto works pretty well most of the times. Then going up into the lens corrections, definitely want to make sure you enable the profile corrections to get rid of all of the distortion. Also, you want to get rid of the chromatic aberration. And what chromatic aberration is just on some high contrast edges, you might find some purple and green fringing. And just by enabling that, you remove it. Doesn't have any bad effect, just a great thing to just check. And also, let me see what ISO I shot this at. So ISO 800, not that high, but still, you can see there's a little bit of grain. And one of the favorite things that I like to do is just add color noise reduction, because unlike the noise reduction, which actually makes everything kind of plasticky, weird looking, the color noise reduction really just gets rid of the purple and green actually sensor noise in the picture. And especially in like shadows with, if you raise the shadows at a high ISO, you can kind of see the difference quite well if you really zoom in and you bring up the color noise reduction. Let's go into the sharpening, and I like to bring that up by around 50, maybe 60 a lot of times, and also bring the mask into the right. Now what you want to do here is hold down the Alt key and it will give you a white mask. Now everything that is white will actually be sharpened and everything that is black is not going to be sharpened. And the reason why you want to actually bring that to the right is because not everything should be sharpened. Since sharpening is just adding, you know, it's just kind of sharpening noise, it's sharpening nothing and giving you weird textures if you sharpen it in the sky or water or anything that doesn't really have a texture to be sharpened. So by actually bringing that to the right and, you know, not selecting any of these areas like the sign here, which doesn't have anything in it, or the asphalt, then you will overall get a more clean picture. And of course, you don't want to bring the sharpening too far to the right because it can be kind of over sharpened, over crisp looking. And I would really recommend you to keep it kind of more reasonable between 50 and 60. Now, going up into the split toning, what I'm going to do is go into highlights, highlight oranges. And I really want to bring up the saturation all the way so I can see the fine tuning. I was thinking about going more into the red and orange tones, but I actually really like the yellows here. It just contrasts so well with all of the rest, with darkness and especially with the blues, which I'm going to add in a bit. And what I want to do is add a more reasonable amount of it. So 100 is a bit crazy, but maybe like 60, which is still a lot, works really, really well here. And then very important, especially in night pictures, well, not really very important, but a thing that works great a lot of times is just going to the shadows and adding blues there, because naturally speaking, the warm tones come from the light sources, whether it be lamps or the sun, whereas the shadows tend to be more bluish. And especially in night pictures, you can just add blues and it makes it look so much more artistic and cool, and you have all of these different ranges of colors from blue to warm tones. So what I'm going to do here is first of all find a hue. You have to be careful if you want to go into the light blues, because then it can add quite a lot of green, so you kind of have to adjust for that if you go for that. But what I'm going to do is go for more of a, I guess more of a regular blue, dark blue, just like that. And I mean, before the split toning, after, I think this is really where all of this artistic look and this kind of very neonish look comes from. It's really so important, especially in night pictures. But then again, what I'm going to do is go into the HSL tool and just fine tune these hues, because I think they're a bit more, you know, especially in the blue tones, it's kind of too greenish. So I'm going to bring the blue hue to the right. And I'm also going to just bring down the green tones, because I do actually like having some of them in it if it's a night picture, but overall it's just too much, too greenish. So I think just decreasing the green saturation, maybe mix that even with the aqua saturation, can work a bit at least. It doesn't do that much, to be perfectly honest. So what I'm actually going to do additionally is go into the calibration and go into the shadows to add some magenta there. And also the shadows, or rather calibration, is a great way where you can further adjust your colors. So here you can really invert the color or go completely artistic in it. And actually going to the minus blue by a lot here works really, really beautifully in my for my taste. And I'm also gonna like fine tune the greens just to make sure I have kind of a nice amount of greens, not too much, but still a little bit. Also the right hue, of course. And then with the reds, let's actually see. I could go into the reds here. As you can see, the signs here really change super drastically, but I don't know if that's what I want to go for. I think I prefer more of an orange and yellow look, and then just add quite a bit. All right, so that looks actually pretty good in my opinion. I was thinking about cropping this picture to maybe something like that. Just make it a bit more tight, have less space, but I don't know if it really works. Maybe just like that. You know what, I actually think it works better if there's at least the guy and the storefront in the right, and also if there's like more space on the bottom. Because even though there's some like empty space right here, it's not such a big deal in my opinion. I think it's better to have, like everything, especially the storefront and the lights. It works quite well. So now what I'm actually going to do is kind of the fun part, at least very soon, and you want to stay tuned for that because it's going to be the local adjustment with dodge and burning. But just real quick before I go into that, I do think I'm going to lift up the shadows, and the shadows is just the very dark parts of the shadows. So by bringing it up, you can actually have the detail in all of these dark areas while still, you know, the whole picture still looks very contrasty. So that's kind of one of the cool ways you can do that. And I think maybe I even bring down the vibrance a bit in the basics after all. And that looks really cool in my opinion. So now I'm going to go into the local adjustments. And first of all, just want to add a big graduated filter over the top and add a ton of exposure, mix that with whites, and also go down into the highlights just so the bright parts are not where's my filter? There it is. Just so the bright parts are actually not, you know, just white weird, but they still have a little bit of detail. That's a great way you can do that. It's just bringing up the exposure, bringing up the whites, and then bringing down the highlights to kind of retrieve that a little bit. And let me actually just, you know, let's just take it chill and kind of look at the picture. I think what I'm gonna do here is overall just leave the color how it is, add a bit more saturation, and definitely add minus clarity, and even, let's see if I can actually add minus dehaze. Minus dehaze is very tricky with night pictures because you have all of these shadows, but a lot of times, especially if you have like winter pictures, then going to the minus dehaze with certain parts can work really well and make it more kind of filmish looking. But yeah, here it doesn't look that great. Yeah, so let's just keep the dehaze at 0, and in the exchange I'm gonna add another graduated filter, this time over the bottom, kind of bottom half I guess. Bring up the shadows slightly and add even more blues there. And what my goal is, by the way, I'm also going to go into the color palette here so I can have a more light blue rather than just a color temperature blue. And the goal here is to have the foreground more bluish than the background. And you can definitely notice there's like a greenish tint in this whole picture to a certain extent. But what I want to do is actually kind of neutralize that with the foreground at least, and just kind of, yeah, I think that actually works pretty well if I just bring up the magenta a bit for the foreground, and that's pretty much it. So I'm actually tempted to see the before and after, but what I think is I'm just gonna like continue with the local adjustments now with the dodge and burning. And dodge and burning is a thing that I absolutely love. I haven't done for quite a while, but what it is taking the graduate, or rather the radial filter in Lightroom and just adding plus or negative exposure in certain parts of the picture, and you can mix that with like color, mix that with clarity, and that way you can just add so much to your picture and really make it more, interesting and, you know, enhance certain parts of the lighting and make some reflections stronger, or rather the exposure of the reflections, I think it's best if I just show you. So let's just add one with plus exposure here and mix that with a bit of warm tones, really nothing too crazy. So let's do that, mix that with plus whites, minus clarity, and let's just go and add a very, very big one right here. Now again, because it's already so bright, I think I'm gonna bring down the highlights to make it a bit more reasonable. And I really actually like that being bright, but I think I prefer minus clarity, so it's really like dreamy and stuff. You could even go into like a completely different color, although it's going to be very hard to do with this specific filter, because the colors are already so much adjusted that you would have to go into the HSL tool, and unfortunately Lightroom doesn't give you the option to use the HSL tool just locally. But I think that actually looks pretty good. Maybe I'm a bit too much in the exposure. But yeah, let's just do that and duplicate and add some smaller ones, a lot smaller than the previous one. And just kind of go over the people, add some plus exposure, and that will just add more interest, or rather more attention on the people. But it will also just make the whole picture more complex, which does make a difference if you look at it from a whole. So maybe on these signs right here a bit, and duplicate. Even on the foreground you can use it, but then after doing that I actually want to go into the minus exposure as well with some of these, because if you have just everything super bright in an eye picture, it can look kind of weird and over the top. So what I want to do is just add some negative exposure as well, and maybe add some like down here. It's always great to enhance natural shadows or natural light tones if you use the dodge and burning. Here also I think I'm gonna just add a little bit more magenta on these people right here, and that is pretty much it. So now what I actually want to do is grab two other graduated filters, one for the bottom left here, and just add negative exposure, really nothing else. And that is just to have more differentiation from the foreground to the actual signs and all of the bright parts. And then to the right, I'm gonna add another one, this time with plus exposure just slightly. And you can notice that it's already becoming very bright. So what I want to do is go into the minus shadows, I think. And that is pretty much it. Now, another thing that I actually want to do is just go out of the local adjustments for a second and go into the HSL tool again. Because I think maybe the color could look a lot different, and it might even work better if I go into more distinct red tones with some of them, and then also take the orange and go into more distinct yellow tones. Because yeah, I really don't want to have that many orange tones in here. I much prefer the yellow ones. And also with the magenta and purple works a lot of times really well in night pictures. So what I'm gonna do actually is go into the which was it again, the primary colors here, and kind of fine tune that a bit more, especially with the red ones above, but even with the greens, just making sure again that there's not some other color that actually works better. And because I've made these adjustments of the yellow tones in the HSL tool, now I can just go into the reds and make it much more distinctively red. And that definitely adds a lot. I don't want to make it too crazy, but then what I can do is go into the saturation of the magenta and purple, just bring that up, and also kind of bring up the luminance just so they seem a bit brighter. And with the right side, what I actually want to do here is just add kind of blue and purple exposure, and a little bit of minus exposure maybe at the end, and just kind of make it look like that. Okay, so I think a very last gray, or rather radial filter with plus exposure maybe, and that is pretty much it. Now, I completely understand that this is a very heavily edited picture. You might not want to edit it that much, but I just want to show you some of the, well, I guess first of all show you my style and also show you what you can achieve. But let's just show you the before and after. It's certainly a very big difference. I think I might have gone a bit too much into the minus clarity with the graduated filter here. And also what I could do is just add more magenta in the sky, or rather the top part. Yeah, maybe something like that. And you can see it's a very distinct difference from before and after. Again, doesn't mean you have to do everything like I have done, but that's just one of the many styles that you could edit a picture like this into. And I'm pretty happy with having still quite a lot of dark shadows while overall having a bit more shadow detail. And also, of course, having a lot of just a lot of the color in the whole picture. Another thing that I actually wanted to try out with this, let's just actually do that right here without making a copy. That is going into the import and, well, the history, and just showing you the picture how it was before, because I kind of want to see if I have a preset which works on this photo. So night vibes looks actually pretty good. Night blue. You know what? Night blue, I think what I could do here is just go into the blues even more. And that would look a lot more natural than my previous edit. Definitely not as artistic, but certainly very different. Let's see here how it looked with the picture at the start, or rather with my edit. Yeah, it's certainly a lot more heavy, but I guess this is a really great way to show off my presets, because over the past months I've been working on these presets, and what they pretty much are my top 25 presets to edit landscapes and city pictures and night pictures. And I made them so you can really, edit pictures in different styles and different colors with just one click. And they're really complete edits from start to finish. So if you want to check them out, or kind of want to see some before and after examples, a link to that will be in the video description. It's certainly very much appreciated if you check them out. But even though a preset would have been a lot faster, I think it is still fun to edit a picture from start to finish a lot of times, because there's still stuff that you cannot do with presets, such as local adjustments or dodge and burning. Of course you could add a preset and then add dodge and burning. Let me know in the comments below if you think that's way over the top, or you actually kind of like that look. Maybe you would have gone into a different color. It's always interesting to see what other people do. Anyways, that's been it for this video. I've been talking way too much. Next video is going to be much shorter, I promise. Check out the presets if you want to. If not, that's completely fine as well. And have a wonderful day. Take care. I'm gonna end this now.